your first post on Facebook after you started your profile, you mentioned that you weren't happy about the announcement regarding the changes to the EU. In particular, that Riot couldn't just copy-paste the NA model. Now, were you referring to the challenger scene, the LCS, or both, or what was up there?
Okay, so, sorry, I'm laughing. This is not really serious, right? But you changed your tone when you're reading, and it feels me. It makes me feel like we are entering in this interview mode. So something in my head clicks, and sorry, I cannot focus.
Don't do that.
So yeah,
but I do it. I do it too. I have the interview voice.
yeah, exactly. Okay, so you made multiple questions in this question. So about copying the name model. So I think any market and European market are different in the sense that NA is a big market that obviously is united. It's okay. It's not one country. It's not only USA. You have also Canada, right? But it's basically the same market, right? But in Europe, you have I'd say it's a. I'm not sure if it's exactly the same size, but it's around the same size. But it's a fragmented market. It has many different countries with many different languages, and even though it's Europe, cultures are also different. But so here are multiple challenges. First, if you have an English stream on NA, it's going to work perfectly. If you have an English stream in EU, it's going to work more or less because more or less all the countries speak English. But in reality, the countries in the south of Europe don't really speak that good English. And also, there's another very, very, very important factor that is the sponsors. So in NA, if you want to get a sponsorship, you talk with Asus or whatever brand, any random brand, okay? And you go to talk with them and they have the budget for, let's say, USA, okay? But then when you go to Europe, let's say that you're an LCS team and you go to talk with a sponsor, you're going to talk with Asus Germany, not Asus Europe, something like this. So the budget that you have access to is going to be fragmented into this market, right? So this is like first thing that it's very important and I think it's important that everyone is aware of. Then about the model, so in NA, there's I'd say, pretty long history of franchising with NBA and all the other sports and so on. And in Europe, you have a completely different model that is all these football leagues, basketball leagues, and so on, that you can, you can go, you go up to the league or you go down to the second league.
Relegation.
Thank you very much. Yeah, my English is good. Yeah, so you can get relegated, right? So in Europe, this is pretty common. And I think it has to do with how both systems treat talent. So let's say, I don't know a lot about esports in USA, but I know a bit about NBA. So in the NBA, you have before reaching the NBA, you have all these high schools and all these kind of universities and so on, and you enter these teams and you practice, and then you can get drafted, right? Mm-hmm. So this is kind of like a mini professional environment, but connected to your studies. In Europe, it doesn't work that way. In Europe, if you're a kid that plays basketball and you're really good when you're 10 years old, then you play with the team in the team of your town or city or whatever. If you continue improving, then you play in a team in a league that is in your region. If you continue improving, then in a league that is in your nation, and so on, right? But the thing is, you are not connected to your university or something like this, and then you are not drafted. Then you're picked up by a team, but you're hired, right? So from my point of view, it would make a lot of sense that Riot actually try to model something like this. So okay, if you want to franchise and do this stuff in NA because it's one massive market with all these sport brands, all these NBA teams and so on, that they want to put tons of money, okay, I think that's awesome for NA. But in Europe, taking into account that Europe has, like, if I remember properly, like 3 times more players. So you have a very, very large base of players. You have a fragmented market. And you have a market, or at least culturally, all these people that are coming from sports, let's say, are used to this format, right?
Yeah.
So why not put money on developing these leagues for these players. So let's say you create an online league that is under 14, an online league that is under 16, an online league that is under 12 or something like this, and you put money on creating all the system where players can grow and then get hired by organizations. So for example, I think that it would make much more sense mimicking what sports have been doing in Europe and putting money on the younger generations, because the younger generations is what's going to make the game continue, right?
Yeah,
This
okay.
is more or less my idea of what I think it would make more sense.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've
No, no,
answered your
no, no,
question.
do perfectly. Because
Okay.
it begs a question. You're making me think. With what you say here, there's obviously a lot of cultural gravitas based on how Europeans see relegation. We grew up with it. It's the system that we know. But if you think about relegation, a lot of your fans are tied to you via geography. Like you say yourself, you grow up, you play in your town, then you play in your region, then you play in your country.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with esports, there is no town. There is no region like that. Does it make sense for us to view esports through the lens of physical sports when the constraints of physical sports, the geography, don't exist?
Okay, so there's multiple ways to approaching this. Um, let me think for a second.
Yep.
So, um, okay, relegations has some issues. Of course, the organizations that are already established don't want relegations, right? Because what you said, they can lose all their fan base and their investment. But I would argue that the organization that gets relegated and lose their fan base have done a really bad job, because what happens in at least LCS, that is what I know most of esports, is that there are a few orgs that do a really good job on getting the message through and creating a fan base and engaging with them and so on. And then there are the rest of the orgs that do really little. So if one of these orgs that do really little gets relegated, then these guys are doomed, right? But let's say that Fnatic gets relegated. Fnatic is not going to lose their fan base instantly or something like this, right? And also, getting relegated is a consequence of doing things wrong. Like, you've created a roster that is not working, with a coaching staff that is not working, and so on. So relegation, it's a way of bringing fresh blood. And this relegation system of bringing fresh blood is tied with all these regional leagues that have teams, right? So right now in Europe, what happens is, or what has been happening is, you have LCS, Challenger, and you have regional leagues, right? But there's here a massive talent pool that can go upwards. But if you don't have relegations, how all these teams, all these leagues, all this talent, how is gonna go upwards? In NA, they had the draft system in the NBA, right? But then you would need to have a draft system in Europe or something like this. So it's kind of okay. I understand that okay, the fan base is connected geographically in sports, but in esports it's not really like this. Is in esports, who has the better marketing, the better strategy on contacting or communicating with fans and interacting with them and so on, is going to have biggest fan base. The brand that is better marketing their personalities and their players and so on is going to have a better fan base. So if you ignore the market, if you don't do any kind of I don't know how to say it, but if you don't interact with your potential fans,
Yeah.
and then you get relegated, so you fucked up in your marketing and you fucked up in your sports. And basically, an esports organization has two things to do: get money from sponsors and win tournaments. And to get money from sponsors, you need to have people that want to view your games and so on. And to be able to win titles, you need to build a team. So you have two things to do, and you've basically failed on both. So you get relegated and you get crushed, yes. But then let's say that instead of Europe removes the relegation, and then you have an organization like this. So you have a bad organization on the LCS forever. It's kind of weird.
Yeah.
I don't know if it makes sense.
No, I totally get what you're saying. It's a weird thing, isn't it? Because I mean, I was through this entire interview, I'm trying to separate LCS and Challenger, but we keep touching ground on them, because I think at the end of the day, the solution to a European style LCS includes Challenger. we have to talk about how we do this whole multi-region thing. So I mean that kind of brings us back to the whole fractured market thing. One of the arguments a lot of people make is that, let's say you have a French sponsor. A French sponsor has no business in Germany, so they're not going to sponsor you in Germany. And if they did, that means that they can't be a very big sponsorship. They can't pay you a lot of money. They're just going to do a French sponsorship. But a French market alone won't keep this game alive. Then the French were cool in Paris, they were great, but they won't keep League of Legends alive on their own. They're not big enough. How do we deal with that? How do we tackle the fact that you need the global scene to survive, but sponsors are endemic to their nations and won't actually leave their countries?
Okay, so I think that only France cannot make League succeed at European level or world level. I'm using France as this example.
Yeah,
right?
of course.
Yeah, any country in Europe, right? But probably France has enough power to make League succeed in France, more or less, right? I don't know the exact situation of France. I can talk about Spain because it's where I'm working, right?
Let's swap to Spain then, because Spain has actually been doing really well on that front. So
yeah, I actually think the Spanish league is one of the strongest, if not the strongest, regional league in Europe. So I can talk about the situation. So here in Spain, we have a team that is called Baskonia, that they are coming from the basketball league in Spain. Then we have Giants, the LCS team, okay, that right now they are playing in the Spanish league. And then you have a team of Aces also. And these teams that I'm saying, they have former LCS players such as, let's say, Noxiac, or even there's another team in Madrid that has Werlib and RNAI as a coach, that he was a former jungler, and also he was coaching in the LCS. So these teams are already paying this kind of talent. So it's not that they're lacking money in this sense. And for example, the team that I'm working for is called Movistar Riders. I think how they've managed to create their organization is the smartest way right now. So they have a massive sponsor, and this sponsor is a telecom, and this telecom has a TV channel and phones and internet and all this, right? So if you think about how well esports connect with this, it's basically the perfect mesh, right? Because you have the target audience between, let's say, 16 and 25 or something like this, mainly male, that don't really watch TV. And how are you going to reach these people better than through an esport org? It's basically the perfect mesh. So you have also a team for Vodafone, okay? And then you have another, then the league is sponsored by another telecom, okay?
Yeah.
So why this cannot happen in France or in England or in Germany, right? And also we already see, let's say in Germany, you have Schalke going and sponsoring an LCS team, right? So why these countries cannot organize their own leagues, and why they cannot create kind of all these regions and then kind of like a Champions League, right?
Yeah.
So Riot tried to do something like this, but it seems like it exploded because no one was happy. And I think what they fell in that they were trying to control everything too much. You know, they were trying to, okay, there are only going to be 4 teams, or at least this is what I read on Reddit, right? I don't know how much of this is going to be true, but this is the information that we have. So you're going to have 4 teams in, I think it was 4 teams in Spain, 4 teams in Germany, 4 teams in, I don't know, UK, and 4 teams in, I don't know if it was France. I'm not sure.
It's France,
yeah. Okay, and then these teams are going to compete, and then these teams are going to go to the LCS. Okay, but they were trying to keep this LCS structure inside a region, and also putting a regional structure inside too. I think it would be better that every country organize themselves, you know, and then you have a European league. And then from this European league, you have a qualifier, kind of like if the regions are, the countries in Europe are the wildcards, kind of. They have a competition and they fight together and they go, and so they can go to international events. So on short term, this clearly will be, well, probably this will be worse, because if you're fragmenting a European league into regional leagues, probably the big brands are not going to be willing to put that much money on the team. So let's say G2 at European level is much bigger than G2 on Spain, right? They have both teams, right? This is what I'm saying. But it will reach a point, or I would say that the player base in Europe is big enough, and the orgs are getting big enough. There's more money coming nonstop, that I think we will reach the point that it will totally work. But I don't think that it can work if Riot is trying to control the whole structure. I think it's better if, let's say, if Spain wants to, I'm just making this up, okay?
Yeah.
Let's say that Spain wants to have 10 teams in the first division and 10 teams in the second division, and then they want to have a third division because Spain has tons of teams and people are spilling money in esports. And then you have France, and France only has 8 teams in the first division and there's no second division. Then let it be that way, you know. And by competition, things will balance in the market. There's more money, there will be more teams, and so on. But if you try to create everything equal for every country in Europe, it just doesn't work that way, because every market is not the same. You're still trying to create this Europe works together in the same structure.
Yeah.
I don't know if it makes sense.
No, totally. I mean, one of the things we had confirmed later on, I can't remember the exact post, was that the LCS now, if it's going franchising, seems as though it won't actually be affected by the regional at all. So they're still kind of doing this regional thing, but now it doesn't look like they are going anywhere. It doesn't look like the regional teams will ever reach the top, or that there's anything waiting for them. Don't we risk then that the only reason they exist is to be like a talent pool that the LCS can poach whenever they want a new player? They can just ruin the league by taking the best one there. Having two leagues that run like not together but separately, does that hurt them?
So I'm not sure if I'm going to ask directly the question, but I will come to it, okay?
Yeah.
So I think there's two ways of approaching this issue. You have the top-down approach or the bottom-down approach. The top-down approach is making happy the teams that are already established in the LCS, right? So if you go to an LCS org and you say, hey, we're going to make you move to this country, and then you're going to be playing on this country, and also you can be relegated. They will say, yeah, of course, we don't want this. We want to stay in Berlin, and please let's franchise, so I cannot lose my money that I've invested, right? But then what happens if you do the top-down approach is that, okay, so what happens with all these other players that are not in the LCS, right? Where they are going to be playing? Because let's say that you just franchise, then you don't give access to these people. So let's say in 5 years, why would the sponsors that are investing money right now on the different countries in Europe investing money, why they will continue doing it? Because they are closed in their national market. They have no way of growing or expanding and getting titles outside and so on. Okay, so this is the first thing, the top-down approach. But if you do the bottom, then what you would do is like you would create a structure where all this talent have the chance to go to the top. Because if you have the chance to go to the top and there's a clear structure, then you will be motivated to play as a player, of course, and as an analyst, as a coach, you'll have orgs where to work. And as a sponsor, there will be teams and tournaments and so on when you can put money. As fans, you will see tons of games. You will have access to a lot of games. So from my point of view, it should be bottom top instead of top down. I don't know if this answers the question.
It kind of makes sense. So I mean, but what can they then? What can they do about it? I mean, assuming right now that Riot is definitely going to go through with this franchising thing, how do they make it work? I mean, how do we get the best scenario out of this?
So I think I don't have the answer. Okay, if I had the answer, I would call them. Hey,
yeah, I was about to say.
Hey Riot, hire me. I can help you. No.
You're gonna give me a lot of money.
Yes, but for sure, the most important thing, from my point of view, is that you create a system where talent can go upwards, and it's a system that is not what you just said, that you have the LCS teams and then you poach a player. You know, it's something like, it could be something like the NBA draft, or it could be something like these relegation systems like the European football leagues or basketball leagues and so on. Or it could be another thing that I cannot imagine right now. But I mean, this is not a game that is constrained by the location in the world, right? You have internet, so why not create leagues on the internet, right? Why not create under 12, under 14, under 16? Why not create a kind of an environment where you give the players a chance to compete and showcase their skills. And yeah, I think that this is something that Riot could do pretty easily, right? But I know that Riot don't really let they don't give easy access to people to create their tournaments and run their tournaments and so on, right? And I think that this is kind of limiting a lot the growth of the game. And personally, I think that Riot should be aiming at making League kind of like a eternal game or perennial game, a game that's not going to disappear. And if you want to do a game that is not going to disappear, then you have to invest on the youngest people, on the younger guys, right? Because these are the people that are going to come in 5 years, and they are going to keep your game rolling.
Yeah. So kind of like with football, where anyone nobody owns football or the right to make a football tournament, but FIFA obviously own FIFA, and UEFA own UEFA, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
But is this bringing in the football clubs then? Is this the right approach? Is this what we want? Because it seems to me now that when we're doing this franchising thing, we look at America, and I mean we even saw Immortals. Immortals weren't welcome in a game that they've helped build. Instead, and obviously that might be due to financial reasons, it might be due to all kinds of things, we don't know. But is this idea that what we want is analog sports teams to come in and take over and make esports teams? Do we want a football-based League of Legends, like more Schalkes?
I don't know, but Overwatch is kind of doing something like this, right? Because they're having this massive fee to get in, and they are kind of connecting with a city and so on. So maybe that's the way that esports is moving, and maybe I just don't understand it, or I just don't agree. But
not alone.
this is what I said before about the top-down approach. They are trying to get the big money, invest in esports, and create these teams without taking care of how all this talent is going upwards. I think it should be the other way around.
What do you think is the biggest challenge that the teams face? Not some rich owner who goes in and buys a team, but like the endemic teams. What are some of the biggest pressure points they have in trying to navigate this new league structure thing?
Well, for the last few years, I would say the amount of money that it's coming from outside esports. So 3 years ago, a team was it came from someone really enjoyed sports or was a former professional player and created its team, and it kind of grew, right? But right now it's not that way anymore. Is an NBA franchise got interested into esports, and now they are just dropping millions on the table. So let's say that you are teams that have been in Europe for a while. So we have Fnatic, we have Rocket. What other teams have been around for a while? Unicorns, yeah. So let's say these teams, they have
H2K. Let's be completely honest, they've been around forever.
Yeah, but I think H2K actually have investment. I think.
Not shit. Sure about it. Yeah, I don't know about that. Okay.
Yeah, but so let's say if you're a team that don't have private investment, then it's gonna be really, really difficult to compete because let's say that you want to hire a player for €1 per month, okay? And then another guy comes and pays €10 per month, then you're going to have an issue because you need to raise your salary close to that level. Of course, players don't get paid €1 and €10,
but I get what you mean.
You get the point, yeah. So if VC money is coming and it's getting the salaries raised 5x, then it's a massive issue for the organizations that grow organically with esports, and then this forces these organizations to get the VC money too. So I think this is the biggest challenge right now, that these old organizations, the organizations that started everything, are able to survive to all this massive amount of money coming from these orgs that don't come from esports.
Okay, well, speaking of all this money then, because obviously that's always going to be an issue, and we, especially in Europe, can't ignore the fact that NA has all the money in the world. How do we compete with that? I mean, even if we don't go franchising, even if we don't bring in like big investors and make Europe, how can we ever compete with the fact that every time we get a Bjergsen, they say, well, we have more money. Why doesn't Bjergsen become an American?
Okay, so I think it's possible to compete, and I don't think it's difficult. So first of all, we have, as I said before, around 3 times more players. Okay, so that's already a good starting point.
We've got twice as many people as well. So
yeah, so if we start with a larger player base, then we're going to have 3 times more players of the same quality, let's say. So NA cannot just hire every European or every Korean because they have a lock. You cannot have more than, I think it's more than 2 foreigners, right, in every team. So that's already kind of the ceiling. Of course, I don't know how many years you have to play in NA to get the NA. I don't know how to say it, but basically that you're like an NA player.
yeah,
right?
I get the endemic citizenship and stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think the best way of ensuring that this massive amount of players reach the top level is that you create a system to train them. Okay. So I'm going to give my approach or what I'm doing in Riders. What we are doing is we are creating a 10-man roster, and we've created the 10-man roster in a very particular way because we had. I'm going to go backwards a little bit.
Yeah,
let's talk about how a normal League of Legends team creates their roster. So they hire the best 5 players that they can access, and then they hire the best coach that they can access, and then they hire the best analyst that they can access. Okay. So what happens is that sometimes you get a really good roster and works perfectly, or at least meshes. For example, Fnatic 2015 worked really well, right?
Yeah.
You had Yellowstar, and then these rookies coming in, and then this rookie coach coming in too, and it worked fine, and it was awesome, and you win tournaments and so on, right? But this is not normally what happens, and so if you do this, what happens is that you're coin flipping. If you're lucky and you hire the correct coach that meshes with the correct team, and then the team is able to mold around the stars of the team, and then you have some players that are willing to sacrifice for the stars and so on, then it will work. But there are so many factors that are out of control here. So my approach is, okay, so instead of getting talking in Spain, what we're doing right now, right? Instead of getting the highest paid players that luckily we could do because the sponsor is a really strong sponsor, consciously we decided to make a team that fits the level of an experience of our coaching staff. So if you get, let's say that you get 5 LCS players and you get a rookie coach, what's going to happen is that the 5 LCS players are going to eat alive the rookie coach. Okay, you need to create a balance somehow. So what we're doing is we have kind of a structure where you have analysts and coach, assistant coach, and then the roster, the main team, and then we have the Spanish league only admits 3 subs, but we are making tests with 10. So right now we have these 10 players. So what happens is that by having subs constantly, you create competition between them, and also if there's any issue of synergy, you can bring the other person, okay? And by having 10 guys, what you're doing is that all scrims are kind of life or death. It's like a death match because they want to get their position, they want to compete, and they want to show that they are the better than the other guy, right? Mm-hmm. So let's say that you create this in the top teams, and then in the regional teams you create this too, and then you continue going down. What's going to happen is that every team is going to have 2 coaches and probably 2 analysts, and these rosters training together. Okay, so what's the negative part of this? That you're investing more money, right? But you're only investing more money if you're hiring the most expensive players, because you can hire, you can create all this structure with the same cost of one team, and the difference is that this month or in 2 months or in 3 months probably you're going to have worse results. But your environment is so much better to grow. Your team probably is going to grow so much faster than the other teams. And the teams that are coin flipping and are failing will drop fast, and they will just fail even though they look good on paper. Okay, and the team that is stuck, they have synergy, okay, they will be at the top. But your org that started kind of lower will continue growing and will continue growing non-stop until it surpasses these organizations. And let's say that you go through 1 year, okay? So again, you have to rebuild your best players, get hired by orgs that have more money, and so on. So if you have a 10-man roster or you have academy and so on, you're going to be picking up players that you've been training for many months. And if your coach gets hired, you're going to be picking the coach that you've been training or the analyst and so on. So you create a system where all the players and the staff, the organization can continue to grow, and your organization, it's not coin flipping every split or every year, right? So I think this is the way that you can do it. So, okay, NA has all the money. Okay, we have more players. Let's have a better structure. So if we take care of the base and we take care of all this young talent growing, then I think we can make it this way.
Okay, oh, very interesting. With that kind of I'm going to segue from there into the National League format, formerly known as the Challenger Series. With the news coming of the franchising system, obviously, everyone was asking, so what happens to Challenger? Because if you can't rise as a Challenger team anymore and then make it into the LCS because now it's franchising and it's just locked, what happens? And a lot of what they said then is that that's what becomes these like national leagues, and a lot of that will be like what you said. Then we have the Spanish league, then we have the French league. How feasible do you think it is to run two leagues that, on paper at least, don't seem to touch each other? Do you think it's realistic that Riot is going to give them the same attention that they need? Or is it better that they don't?
So I don't know about the attention that Riot is going to give them, but like I would assume that Riot is going to be paying more attention to the European one. But for me, that's not the biggest concern. For me, the biggest concern is what's the motivation for players. Because if you're playing in the National League, every player in Europe wants to reach the LCS, right? So if there's no way of reaching LCS, only being hired, this means that it's so much more difficult to reach, right? Or let's say that you're a player that reached the LCS, but then it's not good enough, and then you dropped. Then you're going to go to a regional league, and then you're not going to be able to access the LCS again, probably. So then we're going into this loop of sponsors are putting money on a market that it's small, that don't have growth potential because cannot go to Europe and so on. So I think it's a messed up situation. I think that the regional leagues should be connected to the LCS somehow. I think there should be, as I said, or a draft or this relegation system or something like this, or there should be something.
How do you I guess that kind of plays into it as well then. If we accept the claim that Europeans primarily consume sports in their own language, and we do, we all have a culture of absorbing popular entertainment, media, music, whatever, in our own languages. How do you do that? How do you make a league that respects the local language structure while still catering to an international audience? How do you prevent Europe from just becoming some wildcard region with like 50 different languages that nobody speaks?
So I don't know, maybe it's impossible, right? But I think
it's a fair answer.
No, but seriously, I think that leagues, because there's a lot of people in Europe, right? And I think regional leagues are close to wildcard level right now. And to be honest, it's not like they have massive infrastructure, right? I think this year is the first year in Spain that I've seen quite some structure and actually Riot helping the Spanish league and setting up more stuff. But how to stop Europe becoming a lot of little wildcards? I think you must connect the regional leagues with the LCS league, and you must create, like, I think in sports it's working fine. So you have, let's say, football, you have the regional league, and then you have, well, right now I don't know what's the formal name because I don't follow football, but you have the Champions League, and then you have the other league. Okay, that I don't know what's the name.
I have no idea either. I couldn't give a toss.
Before it was called UEFA.
Yeah.
That was the name before. I don't know if it's the name. That's the name now. So why not create these tournaments? But let's say that you have online tournaments between these best teams, these best regional teams. So this means that the top talent
bollocks. We just lost connection, didn't we?
It's my internet or is your internet?
I have no idea. I've
Okay.
no idea. The last thing I heard you say was that we have UEFA, and that
Okay.
we should make more of those leagues. So start from there.
Okay, I don't even know what I've said. But okay, so yeah, we have this Champions League and then UEFA League, and so if you have all these regions, why not create an online league, right? Let's
Yeah.
say an online league that face the best teams, and then an online league that face the second best teams, right? And then you create this kind of competition, and then you have more competitive games. This is always better for players. And if there's enough fan base and viewers and so on, probably it's going to be interesting. And you're going to have, let's say, the Spanish team versus the French team, or the team from England, or whatever other country in Spain, right? So I think this is a way of making sure that you continue increasing the level, and you make sure that Europe doesn't become just a wildcard region. But as I said, I think it could be completely wrong, right? This is just.
Do you think it would be possible then, in a structure that you're saying there, how do you get the fans in? Let's take a theoretical scenario. Unicorns or G2 or anything becomes like a national team. I'm not saying they will, but just for the sake of the argument. And all of a sudden now, the only people covering them are Spanish people or French people. You know, they lose their audience because there are no longer any multi-language casts. Do you think it's logistically feasible to have enough language casts? And even in that light, should they actually include language casts of the LCS, maybe? Like a Spanish cast?
Okay, so the first thing is like, let's say big teams in Spain, Real Madrid and Barca, they don't only have fans in Spain. I mean, these are the some of the best teams in the world, right? So why this is not possible? Why you cannot have this happening?
But in their case, Real Madrid, I can watch Real Madrid with an English commentator.
Yeah, of course. Let's have multiple language casts. Like before, Spain had like a formal league. You already had Spanish casters casting. You know, there's people willing to cast for the sake of casting because they really enjoy it. So just if you're Riot, give them tools to do it, facilitate it somehow, so you can create castings in different languages without spending massive amount of money. Of course, the kind of the casting quality is going to be lower because the LCS casting quality is really high, right? And I'm sure that Riot wants to meet this level too. But then you would need to assess, is this something that is worth? Because we are going to have a high quality casting in Spanish, French, German, Italian, whatever. Is this going to be good for our, let's say, competition, environment, fans, and so on? So maybe it's something worth. But I think it would be worth. And let's say that you have this Champions League or this online league. I think it would be interesting. There's a French team fighting a UK team or whatever. Then you should have both casts for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think it would make sense.
Would the answer then, to a larger extent, be that Riot are a bit more hands off? Because if we look at the French cast for Paris, for instance, we saw O Gaming take care of all that, and they're not Riot affiliates. They're just doing their thing, but they're casting in French. Is that the trick to it then? Do Riot need to let go of their baby and let it grow?
I would prefer to
put no fine point on it.
Like probably if they just release it, maybe it happens something that they don't want. But I think that don't having it everything under control, I think it would help growth, because right now growth can only happen inside the limits that they create. So or they expand somehow the limits, or they release it so it can grow. And I understand that they want their game to look as professional, as good, and so on. But I think that this is hindering the growth. So somehow I think that Riot should release some kind of control, so you can have online tournaments and you can have more leagues and so on.
Okay.
Well, sorry, just to add one point. So I think that Riot right now is doing something really good. That is Riot are taking care of that teams meet the standards of whatever Riot standards are. Okay.
Yes. Okay.
So let's say 3 or 4 years ago, you had stories of kind of shady orgs, not paying the players and stuff like this, right?
I'm sure we can all think of a few.
Yeah. Okay. So this is something really bad for esports, right? So this is something that Riot did really good in Europe, and they are kind of expanding this threshold of what's good and what's bad. I think Riot should kind of control this or help teams reach this line or this bar, but I don't think it should be limiting other stuff like what I was saying of online tournaments. So a lot of control on things that are extremely important and they cannot be worse than certain level, like for example this. But on another side, for online tournaments, let's open it, let's give a lot of options to people to create these leagues, and let's create even, I think the ideal would be that actually Riot creates a website. Okay, they create a website and then you can go into your under 14 league, and then you have to go, let's say, with your ID or something like this, and then you have to play every time with your webcam and create a scenario that is similar to what players are facing in competition, and kind of put money into this and get the ball rolling. I think that would be the ideal.
Okay, so let me get this right. So your perfect solution then would be no. Okay, I'm building you up now. Your suggested solution here is that Riot kind of like congregate a platform in which, let's say, I want to watch under 16s, or I want to watch under 20s, or whatever the junior league and the adult league is, and then when I come in there, I'd see the different nations maybe, and then see whatever league is going on? Or would you rather have it be some kind of like open competition where I'm below 16, I go in here now, I want to play ranked, and I'll be put on a team and play ranked? How would you go about it?
I think it would make sense. Okay, I'm again going back to sports, but I think sports have it figured out like many years ago. So I think it would make sense to just copy it. So, okay, first thing is like, I'm gonna use Spain as an example because I live here. This is what I know. So in Spain, you have and I'm going to use basketball because I play basketball, so it's what I know.
There you go.
Yeah, so you have your Spanish Federation and Basketball Federation, and then you have kind of different levels of this federation. And depending on how good you are, so let's say you are bronze, silver, gold, platinum, whatever, okay, you play in different leagues because you play with players that are similar level to you, because if not, they will not hire you, right?
No, of course.
Yeah, so then this means that there are leagues for every level, and also there are leagues for different kind of ages. So let's say that right now I'm 31 and I want to compete in league. I cannot really do it because I'm terrible playing the game, but maybe let's say that there's another 4 persons that are terrible like me and they want to compete too. So why there's not a league for us, like an organized league, and we can meet every Saturday and play our league match, and then we have this league, and then we earn whatever random prize, right? So this is for amateurs. But let's say that you're 14, okay, and you want to do the same, but you actually want to compete and you're high diamond or master or whatever, right? So why not create the same thing? But and what about if you're not high diamond or master? Let's say that you're gold, but you still want to do this. So just create all the system where all these people can play their tournaments.
So a lot of public tournaments. Am I right to interpret this? I'm going to rephrase it like that, as a system that encourages a lot of, like you said, you're in this tier, so you belong in this bracket, the junior division, the whatever, and then have a lot of different tournaments available to the people where there's some kind of payout. I'm assuming there might be some kind of pay-in to give them a taste of what the actual competition would be like, and thereby encourage more talent to foster in that direction.
Yeah. You subscribe, you pay a fee to play this tournament, and then you play during weeks or whatever, and then it's kind of like a league, and you have multiple of these leagues and multiple levels, multiple ages, multiple skill levels, and multiple regions.
Yeah.
So this kind of makes all your fan base be able to continue playing the game in a structure, right? And I think this could be helpful. Here it could happen that let's say that I don't have data of all these new accounts, or I actually don't have data from Riot. So imagine that Riot has they check their database and they see that they have no new accounts for the last year. Okay, so now Riot knows that doesn't make sense to be putting money on all these new people. But I really doubt that this is the situation, that there's no new accounts happening in League of Legends, right? So I think it would make sense that you create all the system for young people, but also it would make sense for example, I'm on a basketball team and I play on Saturday. Why I could not be on a league team and play on Saturday? This is what I mean. This kind of
Yeah,
structure.
no, totally, totally. That's
And when we get older, let's say in 10 years, and we have kids, and our kids want to play video games, some kids are gonna want to play tennis or basketball or football, or they want to play music, or they want to paint, or maybe they want to play video games. So why there's not these little schools where kids can go and play video games, and create all this structure? So this is kind of the feature that I imagine that will happen, and I think that Riot should be pushing in that direction.
okay. I thought that was a very, very good idea, actually. I also think it's a very good point to end on because it means I have no obvious questions for that one, but I like it enough that I'm also like I'm gonna have to think about this one. I like it.
Okay.
All right. Well, in that case, that's it for me this time, man. As always, thank you very much for joining me. It's always a pleasure to talk.
No problem. It was awesome. Thank you.
Cool. Cheers.